Welcome to the Breaking the Silence podcast. I am your host, Arthur Nicky Nicole. Here I believe in winning together and creating a safe, supportive space for people to share their stories and start their healing journey. My passion is to help people confront hidden battles, embrace their truths, and take steps towards a more fulfilling life. Every episode is designed to break the silence on topics that often go unspoken, leading to conversations that uplift, inspire, and transform. Join me as we break the barriers and find strength through shared experiences, one story at a time. Hey everyone, welcome to another powerful episode of Breaking the Silence. I'm your host, Arthur Nicky Nicole, and this is the platform where the light shines on incredible people who are doing great things and making a difference in the world. Together, we will uncover untold stories, break barriers, and challenge the norm to inspire change. So let's get ready to be inspired, learn, and join this movement as we break the silence on issues that matter the most and bring awareness to the great people in the world. So let's dive into today's episode. Today's guest, I hope I don't butcher her name. I should have asked her how to pronounce it. Today's guest is Clarisse Saam. She is a professional corporate singer and a leadership and inner critic coach who helps people to find their authentic voice. She believes leadership is less about being perfect, but more about embracing the courage to show up as your full, authentic self, even when it feels uncomfortable. So, after the countdown, please welcome this amazing woman to the Breaking the Silence platform.
Excited to announce that I recently published my very first ebook. It's called Befriend Your Inner Critic, and it's all about helping to calm that negativity in your mind. You know, the one that keeps you trapped on that hamster wheel, expelling all of your energy, but not actually getting anywhere meaningful. So in this book, I'm sharing the perspective shift that not only helped me, but has also helped several of my clients find massive shifts in how they manage that internal. Excited to announce.
Hello, how you doing?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much for being a guest. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit that I haven't told them already.
Yeah, gosh, where to start? My journey really revolves all around like rediscovering my love for singing and realizing the impact it was having in my world. I grew up as many people did under generational trauma and dysregulated parents who really didn't know how to meet a lot of the emotional needs, and that leaves a lot of gaps in the heart. And, on paper, my job looked fine. I had a good job. I was married. I had some creative hobbies. But underneath it, I always felt disconnected and unworthy. And singing had always been a passion of mine, but I had buried it, right? I'd prioritized life, dismissing it as something I could never fully pursue. And then in my late 20s, I reached a breaking point and I felt lost in my marriage. I was uninspired at work and unsure of my value. And I realized that I had to reconnect with what lit me up. But the idea of prioritizing myself, let alone asking for something that was just for me, felt really impossible at that time because I'd been taught so much of those people pleasing habits and dismissing my own need. So really my journey was all about finding my way back into singing and realizing how it gave my life a complete 180. I actually realized I was in a toxic marriage and I had to get out of it. And I found true love. I accelerated in my career. And now, and singing became my roadmap to resiliency. So Yeah.
Nice. I love it. So how did you, say, it's time, the pivotal moment for you to say, I want to be a coach. I want to,
Mm.
help people to overcome things.
Yeah, gosh, it's so interesting to reflect back on this because I kind of realized that it was something I wanted to do along the way. I just didn't know how. I didn't know what it was called. I never really wanted to be a therapist, but I did always want to like hold space for people and listen to them and help them reach for their dreams and their goals. And it was actually kind of, I came about it organically in my career when I stepped into talent development in a large corporation. Part of my job was going to be coaching and mentoring newer emerging leaders. And so they sent me through a certification process through Coach Diversity. And I learned the skill set to be a coach, which is all about really being able to like hold a specific kind of space for somebody, being able to reflect back at them without putting yourself in that bucket, and asking them questions and giving them tools to really shift their perspectives and unlock the wisdom that we all have inside of us, right? We don't need anybody to give us the answers. What we need is someone to guide us to our own answers. And that's where coaching has just felt so natural for me.
So I love, most people coaching journeys start off with giving advice to people. Like go through life, you're giving this free advice and then boom, the light bulb goes off and you're like, you know what? This is something I could be doing for a living. I've been doing it all my life.
Right.
So that's what comes, this thing, like, this is what I should have been doing my whole life.
Yeah.
So in your experience, what's one of the biggest challenges people face when trying to find their authentic voice, and how do you guide them through it?
Yeah. So this is where kind of the crux of my work comes in. And I've talked to many coaches across all kinds of niches. And what we all agree on is it really comes down to there's all sorts of names for it. I call it the inner critic, right? There is kind of this negative voice in our head that is the seed of self doubt. It often starts with our childhood or something that happens to us along the way. And that voice's job is there to try and keep us safe. It looks for, danger, right? It's the more primitive part of our mind. And it's always looking for danger and trying to keep us safe. Unfortunately, as we get older, some of those patterns actually start to get in our way and they become self sabotage. So one of the most effective tools that I've had, and it's the one that I hinted at that in that ebook, is a conversation where we learn to separate the inner critic as not like the truth of ourselves, but as like just one perspective in our mind. And we learn to have conversations with that perspective. If anybody out there is a Disney fan, I often refer to this as like Inside Out, when you think of all the different emotions in the head and each one is like its own personality. The inner critic would be like one of those, except we have the option to listen and take the advice and also respond back and make a different choice. So that's what my clients learn in working with me.
So would the inner critic be the same thing as the inner child, or is that two different things?
That's a very interesting question. I actually think of them as different. I think of the inner, but one could kind of combine them together. They're all connected in some way. Um, the inner child, I think of as more of that like vulnerable, kind of scared voice. It's probably signaling something, right? Like maybe that inner child is crying and that triggers the inner critic to go off and be like, we got to stop this. And here's what you need to do. But the way that manifests for us is self doubt, holding ourselves back, avoiding risk that could really benefit us in the long term.
I love the way you explain that. You're the inner child crying out and then the inner critic. So we got to stop this. I love
We
the
got to
way
stop this. Yeah. And they don't always handle it the best way.
no, let me handle this. I got this. So you emphasize the importance of showing up, as your full authentic self. What
Yeah.
are some most common fears people have about being vulnerable and especially at work or either on the stage? And how can they overcome?
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of what I kind of dig into with my clients comes down to not feeling worthy, not feeling enough, feeling like they need to prove something, right? Like I deserve to be here. Some people call that imposter syndrome. Um, Sometimes it comes off as people pleasing, right? Like, how do I need to contort myself so that people here will like me? And while that can benefit us in some situations, right? We don't always get to choose who we're working with, for example. If you're showing up in a new space and you don't know like what those people want, because we're not mind readers, then it can become very overwhelming to figure out, how do I need to contort? So when you learn to really trust who you are and believe in your value without needing that external validation, without needing to prove yourself to others, then you can show up and there's a detachment involved. That's another thing that I kind of teach my clients. It's actually kind of one of the cures for perfectionism too, is I trust that what I am here to deliver and what I can deliver is solid. It's out of my control whether or not the other person likes it. It doesn't diminish my value if that other person doesn't like it. I'm not saying this is easy. It takes time, but you can show up in such a different way. And because you're showing up with more of that confidence and people see like, oh man, they are really sure about what they're delivering. Like they actually tend to buy into it more than if you show up and people can read when you're feeling unsure about yourself and insecurity in ways that is like beneath the surface.
Right. But the sad part about it, a lot of people don't realize that they're a people pleaser until it's years and years and years like me. I'm years down the road and I'm just realizing that, okay, I did this because I wanted people to like me. I did this
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to prove something to somebody. But I feel like
Yeah.
when you truly step into that mode of, not pleasing people anymore, sometimes you can come off as being cocky because now you're so confident that no matter what you do, no matter what you go through, you're gonna get through it and you're gonna excel. Now you're coming off as this different person, and people don't perceive you the same now because now you're not trying to please them anymore. So, is it possible to help others, and show kindness without sacrificing your own needs or well-being? And if
Yeah.
so, how can you find that balance between compassion and now self-respect?
Mm. Oh, so powerful. Such a great question. And let me tell you, like, this is the kind of thing that I don't think there's ever like a final destination or one true answer for. Like, I still have to figure some of this out myself along the way. But what I can share is what I have learned thus far. Because I mean, there was narcissism in my family. So, like, my greatest fear is I don't want to be a narcissist. That's why I became a people pleaser, right? Like, my needs are less important than the others. I don't want to be selfish. Therefore, I will overgive to others. And it was very difficult for me to realize that that was actually hurting the people that I love because I was so depleted that I didn't have patience for my young child. He was a toddler at the time. And I was like, yelling at him to hurry up and get on his PJs. And I'm like, he's 2 years old and he's literally learning the dexterity to put on his own clothes. Why am I yelling at him? Right. And then so that was kind of like the turning point again of realizing, oh, I can't always be a people pleaser, especially at places like work. And then learning how to shift that and how to find that balance of like, how do I show up with an open and loving heart? Um, and also take care of myself. And here's the most important thing I learned is that self-care is at the core of all of this, and it's not selfish. Think about it like being on an airplane, right? What's the number one thing they tell you? Put on your own oxygen mask before you help others. If
Mm.
we don't know how to recharge ourselves, I'm not just talking about sitting down and watching TV or just taking a bubble bath every now and then. I'm talking about like true recharge. For me, it's singing. Like it's being out there and sharing my gift with the world. When I do that, I overflow with the desire and the ability to help others around me, but I know my limits,
Mm.
right? Or at least I'm always trying to know my limits. Again, I'm not perfect either. But and you can communicate your needs with love too. Like it all comes down to what you know for yourself and how you're communicating it. You need to know how to take care of your own needs. You can't expect other people to take care of that. That's what boundaries are. And then you know what you have to give, and you'll be so willing to give it, I promise.
You know what? I just realized it. This is shit. This is so embarrassing. But I just realized that there were boundaries that you had to set for yourself when it came to others, and self care became something that I'm just realizing is really important. Like I have to really think about myself first before I think about others, because I would be the last person. I would think about myself last and think about
Right.
everybody around me first. But you're right. Self care is so important because if you don't take care of yourself, then how can you take care of others?
Exactly. And I know it's a shift. It feels selfish. What do you mean I have to take care of myself first? Like that's the worst thing. That's other people who've hurt me. That's exactly what they did, was they took care of themselves first. Um it is a tricky shift, but it is so important. And when you can find ways to take care of yourself that really doesn't hurt anybody else, right? It's like, would you fault somebody who had to go use the bathroom or needed to go get a drink of water or needed to eat food every day? Like these are needs. And
Needs.
we have emotional and like, I don't know, soul needs as well.
So you mentioned that singing is a way that you unleash. So let's talk about your singing journey. Where did you meet the mic and when?
Oh, well, I love singing like all through childhood. It wasn't necessarily like super supported by my parents. I was supported to play an instrument, but singing was kind of secondary. So I just participated in choir all the way elementary school, all the way through high school, into college a little bit. I did some performing in high school, had a couple little solos, but um I actually took a break from it. Like I got into college, sang for a couple years, and then it was like, man, I don't have time for this to also be working and also finish my degree and go get a real job. So I just kind of sang in the car, in the shower for like 10 years, just for myself. And then again, mid-20s, I'm like, I am lost. I don't know what to do. Like I feel like I'm just lucky to be in the room and I'm living to serve everybody else. I had a parent and a husband who were struggling with mental illness, and I just lived to whatever they needed to keep them alive. And it was actually the death of a celebrity that was like my wake-up call. It was Robin Williams, who famously struggled with mental illness and suddenly lost that battle. And while everybody was freaking out about the people in my life, of like, oh my God, are they okay? How are they taking this news? I'm like, does anyone care how I'm taking this news? Like, this is my worst fear come to life. I still get emotional. And I realized, like, that's not within my control. And if something were to happen, like, how would I move on with my life? How would I forgive myself? How would I have something else to live for? And I was just lucky to know that singing was the thing that's like, man, I really miss this. What do I want to do? I want to go back and take voice lessons. I got to take voice lessons in the last couple of years of high school. But I had one great vocal coach, and I was like, I don't know how to find someone like that again. Like, this is so vulnerable. I don't want to just see anybody who's going to tell me I'm awful and I should never sing again. Right. And the stars aligned, and I reconnected with that old high school coach.
Wow.
And like that first lesson back with him, he remembered me. Like he confirmed things that I believed about my voice. He's like, wow, you've got a really good voice. Wow, like you've got a really strong belt. And I was like, yes, I believe this to be true, but I'm so afraid to be wrong about it. Right. This is my perfectionism holding me back. And he was not just a amazing, I mean, he is, I still work with him, not just an amazing vocal coach, but he also understood the power of the mindset. And he was always very positive. And it wasn't about like, what are you doing wrong? It's about like, that's great. And if you tweak this little thing, it's going to be even easier and it's going to sound even better type of thing. And that really made a big difference. I started going out and auditioning in community theater. And it's been a decade now that I've been doing this, and I'm getting ready to go into tech to play a lead role in a musical opening next weekend. I regularly go out and sing at a famous piano bar in San Francisco. And like when people see me, they're like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. Will you sing this song for me? Like, it feels amazing. And it's just so fulfilling. I don't know what to say about that.
Oh, how lucky you are
I am
to
very lucky.
connect with the same coach that you had. Now tell me that wasn't meant to be.
I mean, we call this orchestration in my world. Like stars aligned for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So now I'm gonna throw some out of the box questions to make you think.
Okay.
I've noticed that these questions have really shook the room. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna keep going with it and make
Let's
people.
do it.
Okay, so if people pleasing were a song, what would the lyrics sound like? What would be the turning point in that song where the person stops trying to please others and starts to embrace their true self?
Oh man, that is a tricky one. I'm immediately thinking like, what are the songs I sing that are about people pleasing? But no, let me come up with my own here. This is not going to sound like a written song. I'm just going to kind of share the arc of how I envision this song going. I think people pleasing starts as well-intentioned. You want to be giving to others. You want to nurture and care for others. And you're doing it because it kind of fills a gap that you have. And you start to realize that no matter how much you give, the gap won't get filled. And so then you have to find something that you can do for yourself, right? Like you have to turn that giving and compassionate nature on yourself and start filling those gaps. And then when you do, like, I don't know, I'm like picturing this heart and it's got a little sliver taken out and you fill it up and all of a sudden it's complete and it just starts like shining and bursting and everybody can feel it because you're not needing anything from them. You're just giving. When I was a people pleaser, I was giving to everybody and subconsciously holding the expectation that because I was giving to them, they would then give me back what I needed. But they had to figure that out because I didn't know what I needed. And that wasn't fair.
I agree. So the next question. If you could host a voice found retreat for leaders, singers, creators from all walks of life, what would be the first activity or exercise be for you to kickstart their journey of being authentic?
I feel like it would be vocal warm-ups, right? A lot of my work, even though I talk about finding your voice, it's not necessarily literally about the technique of voice, though of course I can teach that. It's more about the mindset of allowing yourself. Even when I was in that like 10-year gap, I'd go to karaoke every now and then. And I remember someone coming up to me after singing like a big Whitney Houston song, and they were like, that was really good. And he was like, you're holding back. He's like, there's more in there. And I was like, well, yeah, there is, but I don't know what's going to happen if I unleash it, right? Like I knew it was powerful, but I didn't know if I could have control over it. And I think a lot of people feel that way when it comes to their speaking voice, when it comes to their singing voice, or when it comes to sharing their opinion and their thought leadership. So if you're in a retreat, you're in a safe space with like-minded people who are in similar struggles, like we establish that this is a place to get a little uncomfortable and try some new things, I'd probably make them do some like screaming. Well, not like screaming. I don't want people to hurt their voice, but like in singing, one of the warm-ups we do is like a big siren, which kind of lifts that back palate and it creates this huge noise. Teaching people to do like some people don't even know how to let stuff like that out, and hearing it come from your own body can do wonders for the mind as well.
You know what? Screaming releases a lot from you too.
It does. Like if you need like a real quick, like I got to get this anger or sadness or intense emotion out, I highly recommend you go somewhere that you can and let out the biggest, most guttural scream you can usually work through that in less than 30 seconds.
Boy, that make you feel a whole lot better afterwards. I'm
Mhm.
telling
You can't suppress it. It's got to come out somehow. So.
Somehow, it's better that way than another way.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say it. Thank you for saying it.
So imagine you could send a message to every person who's ever doubted their ability to lead or be heard. What would that message look like?
It sounds kind of cliche, but I just love that message of like, never forget that you are the only unique you that has ever existed. And your special view of the world is important, and it can benefit others if you're willing to own it and share it.
But you know what? I don't think people really understands what that means. You cannot be duplicated, no matter how much
No,
you are
no,
the only you.
that's right. Even if you believe in reincarnation and we circle through lives, like the time frame that you were born, the parents you were born through, the various experience, like nobody's ever going to have the same experience. As humans, we all go through the same cycles of suffering and pain and sadness and beauty and joy and peace. Like we're all going through that. It's the same human experience, but no two people will ever experience it the same way.
No, and they won't handle it the same way either. They're going to be different. But if people really tapped into that, know that, hey, I'm the only one. Like, I really can do something with this.
I mean, like we're all in the same boat in that regard. And so it can still feel a little bit like, but how do I stand out? But I mean, you really have to understand and own it. And then you will, right? Like you will find your people. But first you have to really understand what that authenticity is for you. And then you can start to find them.
A lot of people around here don't know who they are. So
No.
that's the problem. They're afraid to be themselves. And I was like that for a long time. I was afraid to be me. I was afraid to use my voice. This podcast has allowed me to really be me. The reason why I started was because I needed to unleash my own voice. And then eventually, it became more and more comfortable. The more I kept showing up behind the mic, I was like, you know what? All right, I love this. I love to talk to other people and network with other people. And not only that, put other people in the spotlight too. So then it became, you know what? I'm going to just shine a light on these people doing great things around the world because the world needs that. It's a lot of people out here doing great things that nobody knows and afraid. I've had people come on the platform was afraid to even come to the mic. But it was like, you know what? For you. And I had a cousin actually that was a cancer survivor. And I don't know what made her do it. But she said, you know what? Okay, cuz I'm gonna come on your platform and I'm gonna tell my cancer journey. I'm gonna tell you all about it, tell the world all about it. And I was like, you gonna my platform? So it feels good to be able to encourage people with my voice that I never had until now, podcasting to come and share their stories. So sometimes it takes a whole different level of things for you to use that voice of yours and come out that shell and be like, you know what, this is who I am and I'm loving it. And a lot of people don't experience that. A lot of people take their lives because they don't find out who they are.
Yeah.
And I was there at one point standing there like, you know what? I don't know if I can do this thing called life. But then when you really start walking in your purpose, then you see this freedom, this sense of freedom now, and then you just take off. Just take off.
I believe so wholeheartedly in your mission. I'm so glad that you're doing this, and I was honored to be here to chat with you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that highly. So 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
So imagine your coaching process was a time machine. Okay. What era or period would you visit to inspire people to find their voice, and how would you help them see that relevance of their authentic self? I know that's a loaded question right there.
That's a very loaded one. I'm like, gosh. There were kind of 2 time periods that my mind immediately went to. one of them was the kind of the 20s and one of them was the 60s, because I just felt like in the 20s there was a lot of like, oh my gosh, like so much racism, so much like female oppression. They were just starting. I think that was like the women's suffrage time. Maybe I'm late. I don't know. Um, and then also in the 60s, I felt the same way with like the LGBTQ community and, heading into the 80s and 90s with the AIDS. So I'm like, I feel like any one of those, I would love to go back. And this is where it gets tricky of like, how would I help them? Because the timeline was, or the time frame was so different. The generational trauma were at different stages, right? Like we've all been kind of coming out of this, of like how parents used to raise children to how we raise them now. And I really think that's where a lot of this starts, is understanding like the experiences you had as a child have now shaped you in a way that helped you survive then and will sabotage you now. So let's work to understand those patterns and reframe them in some way. That's all I can kind of think of as a starting point. And then it would just be a matter of understanding, like you've got to ask questions and understand how that mind is working so that you can unravel those pieces and find a way to reconnect them in a way that's a little bit more clear.
But it's interesting that you said those two time periods. But people thought differently in those eras too. They were
Yeah.
totally different, even down to children being born right now. They're different than
Oh
when
yeah.
I was raised, per se. It was
Yeah.
certain things you just didn't do. There were certain things you just didn't say. I was in the era where, to be seen but not heard. But
Yes.
now
Yeah.
these children they're outspoken. They want to
Yeah.
tell you how they feeling, when they're feeling, and they want you to know it. But we didn't have those type of voices. I didn't in my time. I didn't have that voice where I could just freely say, this is how I'm feeling, mom, or this is what's going on in my mind. It was
Mm-hmm.
write it down and keep it to yourself. Especially
Yeah.
with something bad. So I think generations are just different, and I think a lot of things that people dealt with in those eras, they felt they had to.
Right.
Versus now in our generation, now in this time, we feel we have a choice.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
In
the
many
main.
ways, we are lucky to be living in this time period.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So last question.
Okay.
If you could plant a seed
Mm.
in the mind of someone who's been afraid to speak up or lead,
Hmm.
what would that seed be? And how would you help it grow with confidence and purpose?
Hmm. I kind of take this back to one of the points I made earlier, the seed of like that voice in your mind that's telling you that you can't or that you're not good enough is not the truth of who you are. It is a more primitive part of your mind that's trying to keep you safe and doesn't realize that it's actually hurting you. So if you can learn to separate that voice, to catch it, and then acknowledge like, okay, I hear you and I got this, then you will find a little bit more confidence to take that risk. It won't always go right away. It takes practice, but it's all about being brave to be bad at something new.
But I think that inner voice, the inner critic, that inner child, it's hard to shake them. Like,
Yeah.
you just used to like certain things in your life, as a child, you're like, I'm ugly, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not
Yeah.
that, out. And then you have this other voice saying, I want friends. So I'm gonna do what I gotta do to keep people around. So it's
Mm.
hard when
Where'd you go?
people hurt you, you know? They hurt you, and
Yes,
then
it is.
you're dealing with this inner child, like, I need to have this person in my life. So you keep people around in your life because you're afraid of losing people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have so been there. I understand so deeply. And I didn't think it was a gift when I first started learning it, but I see it more as a gift now. Like we can learn to be our own best friend and our own best like nurturer. Everything that we wanted as a child, we can learn how to give it to us. And I don't just mean like give ourselves anything we want, like food or whatever, but like true love and care and compassion and understanding. And in my inner critic workbook, I actually have a link to a special meditation that I created specifically for people who just struggle with that noise. Like, you don't understand how loud that voice is. You don't understand how mean it is. You don't understand, like, I never get a break. This is a meditation that helps you to visualize telling that voice to leave the room and getting a break so that you just have a few minutes to, like, what do I really want? Regardless of what somebody else told me I could or couldn't have, and that I chose to believe, like, what do I really want? It's amazing how little tiny glimpses of that can really start to just, like, again, plant those seeds of confidence. And you can, the more you give yourself time to sit in that space of like, heck yeah, I'm capable of anything, the more those seeds will grow.
See, the bad part about it is triggers. A lot of people, I think, don't understand that, you do have triggers, things that
Oh
happen
yeah.
in life that'll take you and set you all the way back just with
Mhm.
one situation. But
Mhm.
like, is the crazy part about it, I just learned about all this stuff. Setting boundaries for myself, setting boundaries for other people, the
Yeah.
triggers. So now that I'm noticing these triggers, I'm like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Now I got to set a boundary. You can't do that because now that's taking me to a place that I don't want to be.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'm just going to give you one little thing. This took me the longest to learn about boundaries. Boundaries have nothing to do with what someone else does or does not do. It's all about, how am I going to take care of myself? Like, you can make a request. Hey, I just want you to know, when you raise your voice at me, it really gets me emotional. And I'm going to ask that, if we have a conversation, that we do it at a time when we can both talk at like a normal level. Like, you can make that request. But your boundary is, if that person starts yelling at me, I'm going to leave the room. Right? Because you can't
Right.
control whether or not they take the request.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very hard. A book that I just started, came highly recommended, and I already highly recommend it, is What Happened to You. It's an Oprah Winfrey book, and it's a conversation with a psychiatrist. I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head, but it's a great book. And it can really help us understand, like, where did those triggers start, and starting to identify them so that you can learn how to take care of yourself. That's what it is. We don't get to undo what happened. All we can do is understand it and learn to work with it now.
Work with it. That's it. That's it.
That's it.
Man, this has been a great conversation. You might have to come back
It
for a part
really has. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected today.
Me too. So now it's your turn. I'm gonna shine this
Okay.
light. So I'm gonna do your countdown one more time. And then after the
Okay.
countdown, don't freak out with me. Now you're gonna be on the stage by yourself. This is your moment to let everybody know how to follow your journey, how to connect with you, what's coming up for you in 2025, all the good stuff about you. So after your countdown,
Okay.
you got the stage.
Great. Excited to announce that I recently published my very first ebook. It's called Befriend Your Inner Critic, and it's all about helping to calm that negativity in your mind. The one that keeps you trapped on that hamster wheel, expelling all of your energy, but not actually getting anywhere meaningful. So in this book, I'm sharing the perspective shift that not only helped me, but has also helped several of my clients find massive shifts in how they manage that internal. Excited to announce. Hello, everybody. It was such a pleasure to chat with you all today. Again, I am Clarisse Saam. I help emerging leaders and new business owners overcome perfectionism, people-pleasing, and procrastination so that they can find their authentic voice, build confidence, and lead with purpose. And if what we chatted about today is of interest or resonated with you and you would like to talk more, I do offer a free critic calming call. You can connect with me a few different ways. The best way is on LinkedIn at Clarisse Saam, or I also have a page for my program, Creatively Courageous. You can also find me on Instagram at Coaching by Clarisse, and on Facebook as well, Coaching by Clarisse there as well. I have 2 freebies available right now. The first one I mentioned is that Befriend Your Inner Critic, which is the workbook that details the exercise I talked about, teaching you to separate and talk with your inner critic so that you can understand the messages that they want to deliver, and then also learn how to quiet them and take a break from them. The other one I'm really excited about, I just finished it. It is my new purpose workshop. So I have another activity that is a reflection to help you uncover your purpose or find your North Star. It's a very powerful reflection activity that can help you identify themes in your life that relate to what your personal purpose is. And then if you would like even more guidance and collaboration, there's also an invitation at the end for a one-on-one workshop with me where I will hear your reflections, we'll collaborate together on a purpose statement, and then talk about ways that you can align with it. So I'm super excited to connect with you all. And if you take anything away today, I just hope that you'll remember to be kind to yourself and remember that you are the only you, and you deserve to have your authentic voice heard. Thank you so much.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on my platform. If there's anything that I can advertise for you on my end, please let me know, and we're going to do this together.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Nikki. It's been such a pleasure.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you so much to everyone that's tapping into this conversation today. Y'all know y'all loved it. We had a good time today. We really did. We're going to have to do a part 2 because that was a great conversation. Sometimes you need to have certain conversations because then you start learning things about your own self, and it makes you say, self, what am I doing wrong? And we have to evaluate ourselves sometimes. That's how we live a better life, by evaluating our actions, evaluating what we do and how we do it. So thanks for joining today's conversation. Remember, your voice is your superpower. Keep nurturing it, keep using it, and keep making a difference in the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you won't miss the next episode. So until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and always, always speak your truth.
This is your girl, Miss Storm, and I just had an amazing interview with Nikki at Breaking the Silence podcast, and I really appreciate you for having me on your platform today, Nikki. You have some amazing questions, and I love what you're doing with your community and how you're inspiring your followers. Thank you.
Thanks for watching another episode of Breaking the Silence. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.